Hey, do you have a Triumph 3-banger 900cc Adventure? You might enjoy the bike and nice sunny day, you want to go out for a ride. You crank it up, fires up fine, you're going down the road, smile on your face. 5-10 minutes later, the bike just dies. Just like somebody turned the key off. Well, you might be surprised that that's a common issue with these British bikes. And so let you and I find the problem, fix it up for the customer, and get him back on the road. Welcome back to Butler Customs Motorcycle Shop. Let me get your peepers in here and look at this bike, a Triumph 3-cylinder 900cc. You know, cosmetically, these bikes look pretty good. I like the style of them. I love these indented tanks. When we build a lot of chopper bikes or really just kind of cafe racer bikes, we always usually go with these indented tanks like the BMW and the Triumphs have. But you know, the bike looks real good and sharp. I like the soft leather bags on it. Seats very comfortable on it. Bars are comfortable. I guess this would be compared to a Sportster, an 883 Sportster, or even a 1200 Sportster. Here's the issue, which is quite common on these, and sometimes they're hard to diagnose. This will start up fine when it's cold. When the bike gets warm, then the bike stops. And I don't mean just sputters and spits and coughs out. I mean just like you turn the key off or the kill switch off. Let's just start diagnosing this bike. I believe it to be an electrical issue by the way that it turns off. Usually if a bike has a carb issue, this has the 3 carbs, inline carbs. And for all 3 carbs to have an issue at the same time would probably be a vacuum issue. But what the bike would do is it would run pretty poorly on startup, especially cold. And then as it warmed up, it might run a little better. And if it perhaps didn't, then it would kind of cough and sputter and spit and then slowly die out. What this bike is doing is that it starts up fine cold, and then when it warms up, it's literally like you just turn the ignition off. So I believe it's going to be an ignition issue, a wiring issue, a running issue with this bike. And I'm going to go over the procedures that you would want to do step by step if you got a bike like this and it's giving you this same trouble. So if we're dealing with electrical issues where the bike just actually cuts off, of course you're going to start with your kill switch here and your ignition switch. Now, since the bike does start up when it's cold and it only turns off when it gets warm or as the motor warms up, we can test these when they're cold. So we can start the bike and test this switch. Does it kill the bike? And then when we turn it on, are we able to start it back? So we've done that. We know this switch works. Let me talk a little bit about these kill switches. On all bikes, these are plastic switches. And they're plastic on the inside where they connect to the wires that are going to run down your bars. This is a kill switch. This is for emergencies only. If you need to shut the bike off quickly, you can hit that and the bike turns off. You don't even have to raise your hand up off the bar. You can hit it right there. Emergencies only. Because these are plastic, these will wear out if you use these all the time. So I always tell people, never use your kill switch. I can't tell you how many of these I've replaced where people use them, especially on Harleys as they get older and they vibrate and they're plastic. These will break if you use them a lot. These are for emergencies only. Always turn your bike on and off with the key with the ignition. So we've tested the key and ignition, we've tested this, that's all fine. So now we're going to start at the plugs and work our way back to the electrical system. Again, I believe this to be an electrical issue because it doesn't quit like it's an issue with the carbs. And when you start it up on choke, it's great. It idles fine. When you let it off choke, the carbs are balanced. They sound good. The RPMs on the tachometer is showing steady right where it should be. However, when the bike warms up, like I said, it just turns off. So I'm not thinking it's a gas issue. I'm not thinking it's a compression issue. I'm thinking it's a electrical issue. So let's start here. The middle center plug is very hard to get to with the tank on. So right now, we're just going to test this plug and the outer plug on the other side. And we'll just pull this off. Pull this out. And we'll put a tester on here. All right, we got the connector on, our test light on. We'll turn the key on and we will crank. All right, no spark there. So now even with it cold, it is not firing up correctly, which it's never done that since it's been here before. So we're not getting any spark to the coil, and we got the same reading on the other side as well. Now these bikes have 3 separate coils that are under this tank. So it's odd to me that all 3 coils would go bad at the same time. I inspected the coils. We had the tank off. Everything looked fine. I didn't see an issue with one that was split or broken. And even if one goes bad, remember you still got 2 separate coils that run each plug. So even if you had just one good coil, it would still try to run a little bit. And so I don't think it's an issue with the coils. So I tested the coils, owned them out. It wasn't that. So let's run over here. Of course, I took this side cover off. This side cover I've got unbolted. And right here is your CDI box, ECM box, MIR, whatever you call it. The computer, the brains of all this. When I tested the wires here with what should be sending out to the coils, I got nothing. I made sure I had all the safety switches, that you should have when you start the bike. Of course, you got a kickstand safety switch here. This I don't think has the clutch safety switch on, but regardless, you could hold it in just to double check and make sure. I said, well, definitely got to be an issue with the ECM then, since the ECM is not sending any signal to the coils. Checked all of our safety things, ground wires, everything was good there. And the ECMs are, they're pretty penny. And the old one looked pretty old and almost swollen out. So I'm like, okay, there's the issue. Got the new ECM in, riveted back in, plugged it up, everything fit fine. Got the same exact number as the one that come off here, so we know that it's the exact match. And still no spark when it gets hot. What you might not realize on these bikes is that there is a pickup coil that tells the ECM when to send the signal to each of the coils. If that pickup coil goes bad, then it will not send a signal for the ECM to fire on the plugs. That pickup coil is located under this cover. Here's the wire that runs down to the coil, and it just runs, kind of tucks up under here, and it's to a connector right here. Now you can test this connector. See if I can pull it off here with one hand. There we go. 2-prong connector here that you can test with. I'll put a multimeter and gauge on there, and I want to show you how I know that this pickup coil is indeed the issue and the problem. So we're just going to take this cover off now, and then we're going to put our multimeter on these two prongs, and we're going to see what type of readings we get. I'm going to show you a trick you can do to see if your pickup coil is fine when it's cold, but then when it gets hot, it shuts off any signal. Your line runs out, it runs over to this connector, which I've got it running up to my ohm meter, which is showing great. 654, 53, that's doing great. Of course, nothing's on, nothing's moving. Now, what I'm going to do now is put a little heat to it. And when I do that, I'm just going to kind of brush it back just a little bit. I want you to watch what happens. And I just brush it by a little bit of heat. It goes down to 0. Take it off the heat, it goes back up. All right, when that pickup coil goes 0, all right, so that's with it hot, your ECM box will get 0 signal. Therefore, your coils will get 0 signal, therefore, no spark. Well, now that we know that it is indeed the pickup coil that is bad, when it gets hot, the readings go to 0, and it's not sending any signal to this ECM box. So let's go ahead and get this out of here, and we'll get a new one. Now, on this wheel here, you'll see these little tabs. When you set your new pickup in, there'll be a gap here between this and one of the tabs. So you want to make sure that you've got this wheel lined up. See how that's kind of off a little bit? So we will line this wheel here up to this pickup coil. And you can even see that they are numbered here. The A is for probably advanced, and then there's cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 3. So as this spins around and hits cylinder 1, boom, sends a signal up to the wire and to the CDI box, which sends it to the coil, to the plug, and fires. And so these are known to go bad as they heat up and cool down, heat up and cool down. They're plastic with a metal pickup, and they go bad. So we've got a new one in and a new gasket. Let's get this now lined up, and we'll get this pulled out so that when we put the new one in, we'll be able to set a gap. There is a gap you have to set here when you put the new one in. If you don't set that gap correctly, the firing may be off as far as spark. Okay, now that we've got it lined up, of course we jacked the rear tire up, put it in the highest gear, and we didn't pull the plugs out since it's only a 900cc, and we didn't have to move the wheel much. So we backed it down, kind of lined it up right to where that F for firing is going to happen on the pickup coil. I'm going to measure that gap. I suspect it to be correct because it's running so good when it's cold. And then this pickup coil only goes out when it heats up. But I'm still going to measure that gap, record it. Then we're going to pull what the gap should be and put the new pickup coil back as it should. Now that the wheel is set, we can just take our star bits, take that one out and that one at the bottom, pull this out and pull it out of here, clean up all of our seating around the gasket and the cover. And we've got the new gasket here, which is a little bit thinner than I suspected, so I might put some good sealing around that. And then we got our new pickup coil here, come over from across the pond, and we'll put that all together. Okay, so the filler gauge wound up being a .022 an inch or a .55 millimeter. That's what it was set to, and drags really good for me. The 23 was a little tight, but the old 22 was perfect. All right, these bolts here are T30, and there's 2 of them. And man, are they in there tight. There we go. You don't want to use a gun on these because you sure don't want to break off this tab on either side. And these are in here tight. Now once they're loose, I want you to notice, see how that can slide in and out? And that's how you set your gap. And when you get your gap set correctly, I usually stick a filler gauge in there to hold it and tighten one end up, check it again, and then tighten the other end up. Now when I was using a torch, I was never putting the torch on that pickup coil. I was just heating back and forth to warm it up and keeping it well away from this because this is plastic. So to look at it as far as appearance, you can see that and feel that it is rather wore out. Of course, this, since we're not going to use this, you can just use this to pry this rubber piece out. And somebody RTV'd around that, so we'll clean all this up now and put the new pickup in, and then we'll gap it correctly. Luckily for us, this gasket residue is coming off really well for us. And don't forget, of course, to clean your cover off as well where it sits on here. And while you're in here, also check out where these bottom oil pan case meets with the base. Make sure your sealant is good in there and over here as well. Don't peel that off or anything. Just kind of visually inspect it and make sure that all looks good. If there's a gap in between the sealant, maybe the sealant's come off a little, just put some more good sealant on there. I use a German sealant that is really good, that a mechanic friend of mine that works on cars turned me on to. And ever since I've started using that gasket sealant, I've had 0 issues with any gaskets that I've ever installed. All right, what I'm going to do next is go and take a wire wheel and clean these threads off on the pickup bolts that go in here, just so they're nice and clean. I will put blue Loctite on those, and we'll pull up the torque specs on that. Actually, I might use red. I think what I'm seeing here is red was used on this before. So I'll pull up the specs on it, see what we torque these to, and see what our gap should be. I don't know about you, but I love the way Loctite smells. Isn't that weird? Am I just weird or what? All right, we'll get one started in. We'll get the other one in. Now we're just going to get these down to where we can still move the pickup in and out. Now on the pickup, I had a 22, which is a 0.55 millimeter. The service manual says this should be anywhere from a 0.6 millimeter to a 0.8 millimeter, and they call it an air gap that's between them. Now you can tell this is magnetized. So anywhere from a 0.6 to a 0.8. So what I'm going to do is set it right in the middle at a 0.7 millimeter, which is a 0.028. And so I'm going to go ahead and just set the filler gauge in between And then I'm going to make sure with the filler gauge in that I have pressure on here. And I'm just going to go ahead and snug down the pickup. And that should stay. And we should have a nice smooth gap. I'm noticing as I tighten this down, it kind of still moves a little on me. But I am very happy with that. Again, we're shooting right in the middle of that. So if we're a little off here or there, we're still okay. Because there is a pretty good tolerance on it. Now these bolts are torqued down to 10 M&Ms, N&M, whatever it is. Which isn't very much actually at all. You think that'd be a little bit tighter than that. So now that we got that set how we want it, let's double check. And we are good. Now we can just kind of feed our thing in here where we want it. Push that in good and tight. Again, I usually don't gasket these because if you buy good quality products, you don't have to. All right. Now we'll clean up the outer cover. We will blue Loctite all the outer cover bolts. And we will put this back on. Plug this end up. Run the wires where they should be. Zip tie them up. And we should be fixed. So the gasket sealer that I use that my friend turned me on to is this L-Ring Das Original. I guess Das means the in German. It's made in Germany. Durco HT Gray, up to 600 Fahrenheit, guys. Pretty good stuff. I've always enjoyed this because it lays on real thin. So you can lay it really thin. And I just, since this gasket was so thin, I put a really thin coat on it on both sides, and then we'll get it set on there and it sticks great. We'll line up our holes best we can, and once that's on there, it's pretty much good to go. And then we'll take our cover, make sure we put blue Loctite on all the bolts and run those in. Now on that gasket, that sealer that I use, gasket maker, whatever you want to call it, I like to let it set up for about 5 or 10 minutes before I actually put it on anything. I'll get me a bolt started up here and one started down here, and that'll help kind of hold things in place. Just run things down just to hold it, and I'll go ahead with my other bolts. Again, I'm not cranking down on them. I'm not going in a straight line, we'll go in a crisscross. And don't forget now, when you take this cover off, you will lose some oil, so you'll want to check your oil levels before you take off riding on it. Once you got those all tightened, just go around. I don't know the torque specs on these, but they're only 8mm, so I just usually make sure they're good and snug. Don't want to go crazy on it. If you use good gasket and a good gasket maker on them, it'll be fine. All right, we'll clean up any excess. Since I put the gasket maker on real lightly, there's not a lot of excess oozing out the sides, which is good. And there we have it. Now we'll run our wire up where it should be. We'll hook our connector up and we'll give it a start. Well, the Triumph went down the road just great and didn't cut off after it warmed up and got warm, so that is a success. Customer did change these jets in the carburetors after these custom exhaust was put on, and then when he bought it, he changed it back to stock jet. So I think I would probably change it back because I had a little bit of pop in on decel, and overall she did good. Well, that's going to do it for this video. You and I were successful in getting the Triumph back out on the road and not turning off and cutting off anymore. That indeed was the issue and the problem. Had a nice little ride on it and it was a lot of fun. I like the Triumphs. You know, they feel meatier than Harley, you know, sporty. And I think it's because the tank is a little bit wider. And for me being a bigger guy, you know, it kind of feels more of a bike, I guess. I don't know how to explain that, but again, thanks so much for helping me out. We're going to try to still have the goal of doing a video a week. You know, the people that we get subscribed to our channel and all the comments that we get are really good people. And we've gotten some very kind words. And I know I got a lot to learn as far as video shooting and placement and audio and, you know, upgrading equipment. I mean, guys, I'm just in here with my iPhone, and it's an old iPhone at that. So I really appreciate your patience, and any suggestions and things you can help me out with, I would appreciate it. And I try to reply to every comment that we get on all of our videos. And so thank you so much for being here, and have a blessed week. And tell your mom and them I said hi.